Welcome to another feature at Mother-Daughter Earthcast. And today we have Grant Brown with us again. We love having Grant Brown on our show. And thank you for joining us once again, Grant.
Well, happy to be here. Thank you, Gina, and happy to see you, Mariana, as well. So where to begin? It's been a crazy couple of months since the last time we talked, and really happy to be back. Today is a joyous celebration in the US and abroad for reasons that we can all allude to.
And Grant, if y'all are watching this one day on YouTube, you can see his wonderful background of a gorgeous forest. But if you're listening to it on the podcast, just imagine Grant has this most peaceful background right now. And we just love connecting with you, Grant. We love having you here. So tell us kind of what's been going on. I know you're going to give us an update on Happy Eco News, which we can't wait for, but tell us what's been going on and any highlights or things you want to share with our listeners since we last visited with you.
Sure. Well, most recently, I was actually just did a presentation to a group called Ocean Bridge. And they're a group of about 160 18 to 30-year-old, mostly university students and postgraduates who are working as ambassadors on ocean ecology projects within Canada and abroad. And so they are basically trying to make the world a better place through their own efforts. And I think it's really representative of a lot of the young people today who are taking an active role in the future and the ecology of the planet. So they're funded by the Canadian federal government and through the Ocean Wise program, which is a sustainable seafood program and ocean cleanup, et cetera. And so they're really a fun presentation, a really good group. Got a couple of volunteers to help with Happy Eco News after that. So you can check them out at Ocean Bridge. And I'm sorry, I don't have the URL right in front of me right now.
I'll put the show notes for anyone listening to this. We'll put their link in the show notes.
Thanks. And gee, what else? Well, just kind of doing what I do, the Happy Eco News. Another note that I'd like to bring up is the idea of having guest posts on or guest writers on Happy Eco News. So I've been basically running the Happy Eco News for about 3 years, up until very recently by myself, in addition to my day job. So it's been a pretty hectic run, and I've been doing about a 1,500-word blog post every week for the last 3 years. A lot of writing. Oh. So I have very recently had guest bloggers come on, and it's really great because what I like to do is to help promote, use this as a platform to help promote other people and other projects that are doing positive things for the environment. So this is an open call to all of your listeners to please reach out to me if you have anything you'd like to say or news you'd like to share on the Happy Eco News, and I'd be happy to offer you a guest blog position 1 week. So right now we're booking out into March and beyond. So if anybody is interested, they can reach me at grant@happyeconews.com.
I love that, Grant, and anyone definitely reach out to him. And if for some reason you want to, it's easier to reach out to us, we can always put you in touch with Grant. He has been doing an amazing job. And honestly, we've all been the amazing recipients of his hard work. I mean, Grant, you literally single-handedly keep us positive week after week. And I think one thing that we both, all three of us, you, my mom, and I have in common is that we just love highlighting what other people are doing. There's so much awesome stuff going on out there. And one of my favorite parts of what my mom and I do is highlighting that. And your platform is literally built on that, which is partly why we love you and what you do. So listeners, if you have, and it doesn't even have to be like an official, business or organization. I mean, Grant was just telling us about a wonderful story that he featured of this a woman who went and lived kind of remotely and her connection to the land. I mean, really, you're very diverse and open to just people sharing their story, whether it's a project or a personal story. So y'all, If you have something to say, say it to Grant.
Absolutely. I think that it's all about us all coming together. I was actually last week I had a blogger write about. She's actually a psychologist, and I think she's writing a PhD dissertation on eco-anxiety. And her last blog post on Happy Eco News was about eco-anxiety. And I know it's not a super happy topic, but I think it's important. I think, but one of the most important things that I got out of that was this lack of connection that people are feeling right now to each other and to the land. Mm-hmm. And so if one of your readers has a story, and like you say, it doesn't have to be an official project, but we all need to come together. And so I'm here to help facilitate that in some way.
I love
it. And also to be able to go have something on Grant's Happy Eco News to help cheer people up and keep them positive during these COVID-ridden times. It's a win-win situation for everyone, because I will tell you on Monday mornings when I get your feed with the top news of the week before, it's the best way to start the week off. Love that Monday morning post.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we need it now more than ever. And things are not great all over, but things are getting better, and I truly believe that. So have hope and stay positive and keep fighting the good fight, and we will come out on top eventually. I do believe it.
Most definitely.
Awesome.
So shall we dive in?
Well, before that, isn't there a launch happening of?
Oh yes, of course. Thank you so much, Mariana.
That's a big
So I have some friends that in the UK and Denmark who are operating and launching a new app called Iluna, and it's iluna.com is the website, and I'm sure you can link to it, Mariana. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Iluna is basically a way to gamify the idea of making personal positive changes for the environment in your daily life. So if for people who are wondering what they can do and how they can do more to make a positive change throughout their day-to-day life, this app will actually give you daily reminders to do specific actions that over a 30-day period will create new habits. And these new habits are now positive. So it can be something as simple as turning the lights off in every room while you're not in there. It could be stuff like using less plastic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They also offer merchandise available through their app as well, I believe. I don't know if they've got that aspect going yet. But it all ties together with the idea of doing the right thing for the planet. Small incremental changes, as we know, add up to big societal changes. So it really fits in line with what Mother, Daughter, Earth are doing with your website and the podcast, and with what Happy Eco News is doing. And it's just a good project that I always like to promote as much as possible.
I love that. I will definitely link that in the show notes. And my mom and I actually had a strategy meeting at the end of last year where we really thought about how to focus our message for this year, because we're obviously passionate about so many things, but we sat down and really thought about what the core message or messages were. And one of them is really talking about and highlighting the fact that small daily choices really do add up, and don't discount those. And it comes up so much in conversation with you and our other guests that it's so true. So I will definitely link that to Iluna, because who doesn't love gamifying things? I do. Everyone does.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's dive in now to all this happiness from Happy Eco News. I can't wait.
Okay. So right now, being in recording this in January, we're going to be talking about the top 5 stories for December of 2020. And so that puts us a little bit behind schedule, but you know what? They're still the top 5, right? And they're good stories. Yeah. So number 1, scientists in Costa Rica are growing new corals to save reefs. So the scientists have been developing new techniques to help regenerate coral reefs found in Costa Rica. They use techniques that were developed elsewhere as well as their own to grow coral and then replanted in areas that are damaged by human activity. They're restoring the local ecosystems and helping researchers abroad who are doing the same thing. So now, this is really cool, and it's important for a lot of reasons. Their coral reefs are very diverse ecosystems, and they support more species than any other marine environment. The biodiversity also supports commercial and subsistence fisheries, and then provides jobs in ecotourism, et cetera. But it's not just good for jobs or for, harvesting fish. Coral reefs, which is something I didn't know, but coral reefs are actually considered key to finding new medicine. So they're similar to the biodiversity that you would find in tropical or subtropical rainforests. Many beneficial drugs for humans are now being developed from coral reef animals and plants, and it is thought that they may contain cures for cancers, viruses, and many other diseases. So they're super important for human wealth and the health of the planet. Another sort of I guess offshoot benefit from coral reefs for the land is that they create barrier reefs. So behind the barrier reef, now you've got another ecosystem of animals and plants that you wouldn't find in the open ocean. But they also provide protection from large storms, waves, floods, et cetera. And that can translate to a huge savings in property losses and loss of life. So I guess by understanding and learning how coral grows and identifying the types that adapt most readily to changing environmental conditions, we have a very good chance of reversing the loss of coral reefs and maintaining them for the future for all the reasons listed above.
Wonderful.
I love that. And so, Mom, you go ahead. Oh, for listeners who don't know, Mom and I are actually quarantining from each other, unfortunately, at the moment. So we are not in the same location. So but I can still feel her bubbly energy all the way here in my house.
I know, I can't nudge her. Say,
me under the table telling me to be quiet. So Mom, sorry, go ahead.
well, what I wanted to ask you, you had mentioned that they're able to replace the coral reefs that had been damaged by human activities, and I would presume such as cruise ships or that type of thing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of reasons for the damage, and I know that in a lot of places that I've been fairly recently where they have coral, is they're banning certain types of sunscreens from the beaches, because when they wash off in the water, they're toxic to the marine organisms, and so they damage the coral. I think that the ocean acidity has been changing due to climate change, and that has been affecting the health of the reefs.
Can they do it because does it help for the coral reefs that have died off from the rising temperatures in the oceans?
Yeah, so I think that what they're doing, and I know there's an organization in Florida, and I'm trying to remember the name of the group. It escapes me at the moment, but they were basically identifying specific species of coral that grew well in warmer, more acidic, changing environmental conditions.
Okay.
And also the species that not only grew well, but also grew faster. And so they would take these, and basically you can take a piece of coral and break it into smaller chunks, and then plant them, and they grow. So just like taking the rhizomes from a plant, you can actually plant coral and it'll grow. So you can propagate coral and then replant it in the open ocean, and then you're basically creating a reef that can sustain the traditional or normal forms of life in that location. So I think there's a lot of aspects to it, and the research is ongoing. It's really great to see it be done. And you're right, a lot of the damage does occur by cruise ships and large yachts. I remember reading about a yacht that they didn't have their anchor set and correctly, and there's a certain thing called scope. So basically, you want to have X amount of line out for X amount of depth, and that changes the angle of the line on the anchor, and then it won't drag. They didn't do that correctly, and it dragged for I think about a kilometer, but it was just going back and forth and doing lots of damage. And they ended up, I think it was with a $500,000 fine for the damage that they had done. Now, that's a good deterrent, but unfortunately, it doesn't replace the damaged coral. And so, they'll never make that mistake again, thankfully. And I think, that's actually another growing trend that we're seeing is these increases in penalties for the polluters or for the people who damage the environment. And why not, right? I mean, if you've got a polluter that is making money, especially off of a product that is damaging to the environment, say plastic or whatever, if they're dumping it or if they're not being responsible for how they manage it, then they should have to pay for the cleanup, in my opinion. Yeah. And then that'll really incentivize them to do the right thing and create products that are less damaging overall.
Absolutely. And my one last comment before we move on to number 2 is one of the things that I loved about that highlight was it really brings back to mind and just reminds us that these ecosystems provide so many tangential benefits that we may not even be aware of. And unfortunately, it's not until we usually lose them because we've damaged them or destroyed them that we start really realizing all of the benefits that they give us. So like you were saying, cancer research or medical research and, a barrier for inland. And these are things that we already have recognized, but it brings to question, like, what are all the other benefits that they're giving us that we don't actually know and we've taken for granted? So we don't want to get to that point where we don't have them anymore.
I think a lot of times we don't know what we have until we've lost it. And isn't that human nature in a lot of ways, right?
Yes.
In relationships and in our relationship to the environment. So hopefully we're learning and we're not going to go down that path completely. Pave paradise and put up a parking lot. Was that a Joni Mitchell song?
True. I'm gonna put that little song in the background.
It's a great song. Yeah, I'd like to hear that right now, actually. After we're off. So number 2.
Yes.
14 countries commit to Ocean Sustainability Initiative. So governments responsible for 40% of the world's coastlines and 20% of global fisheries announced commitments to a huge ocean sustainability initiative. The countries are Australia, Canada, Chile, Fiji, Ghana, Indonesia, Jamaica, Japan, Kenya, Mexico, Namibia, Norway, Palau, and Portugal. So a huge diversity and across a wide range of geographical areas.
Nice.
They've pledged to end overfishing, restore dwindling fish populations, and stop the flow of plastic pollutions into the seas in the next 10 years. Of particular note was the pledge to remove subsidies to the fishing industries, which in turn contributes to the problem of overfishing. So why is it important? Well, it's obvious. But basically, this agreement would dramatically increase the food and renewable energy production and contribute 1/5 of the greenhouse gas pollution reductions that are required to stay within 1.5 degrees of global warming. So a lot of spin-off benefits beyond just fish for people. But in terms of fish for people or for food for people, research has found that if oceans were sustainably managed, they could provide 6 times more food than today. When many types of fish are basically taken to the point of beyond their limits to recover. So if you can manage them sustainably, they actually produce more fish per square meter of ocean. Economists also calculate that for every $1 invested in sustainable oceans, there's about a $5 return. So in addition, it would create about 12 million new jobs. So it's huge. And then I guess, so these are all great, and but it gives me hope because I believe that something like this is kind of indicative of a movement towards bigger things. And my opinion is that if we can make multilateral agreements that represent 40% of the world's coastlines, then there's really no change that we cannot even get more jurisdictions to commit to doing the same thing. And this could be ocean, but it could also be, agriculture. It could be, fossil fuel consumption, those types of things. A lot of those things can be managed and done now. We just need to get to that point of actually monitoring them and agreeing to do it. So pretty good stuff.
Through your research, did you see any mention of whether or not there had been talks that the United States might join this initiative in the future or near future?
I think that the pressure's on, and just like a lot of the environmental agreements that have been kind of ignored by the previous administration, this one would probably be open. Certainly, you know, there's nothing egregious in it that would say that would be damaging to the U.S. economy. And if you look at the numbers, it actually would be beneficial.
Yeah.
I think what, you know, what's happening, and it's not just the U.S., but I think that there's a lot of special interest groups that have significant political sway, and they don't want things to change. You know, they've got an existing business model and it's making them money, and they don't want to give up on that. And so convincing them to make those changes is going to be really difficult. And collectively, we as a society need to indicate to our elected officials that we no longer want those types of industries to be subsidized. We don't want them to be running amok and without any kind of governance. And so it's time for them to step up and actually do their jobs. And I think we'll get there, you know, and this is a really good indication that that's starting.
Yeah.
But in specifics to the US, there was no indication of any countries that weren't in it, just the ones that actually had agreed to it. So they may be close, you know, and that might be the next announcement.
Like, yes, hopefully.
Well, that's great news.
It's great news.
Top two were ocean related. This is really interesting.
Yeah. Well, so the next one is air. And
perfect.
So earth, wind, and fire, huh? No, let's stay away from the fire. But so first fully carbon neutral cargo flight is set to take off from Frankfurt Airport. So this is a really interesting one. Basically, the idea is that the airline industry is heavily subsidized, and it's extremely popular, and the true cost of air travel in terms of its environmental impact is not being paid. So people are hopping on cheap flights and think nothing of flying halfway around the world for a weekend getaway. And as a result, the carbon emissions from that, you know, are astronomical. I think a lot of people now are buying carbon offsets for their flights. You can usually do that when you book your ticket. But, you know, it doesn't change the fact that that's getting put into the air in the first place. And that's really the wrong direction. So what they're doing is with this particular flight, which would be the very first carbon neutral flight in the world, they're using biofuel. And it's a really good first step in reducing the carbon emissions from the air travel industry. So sustainable aviation fuel, which is known as SAF, is produced from components such as recyclable vegetable and cooking oils. You can basically, just like people can run their diesel trucks and cars off of biodiesel, they can make it at their home out of fryer fat. They can do this with jet fuel as well. And so it's kind of good because all of that stuff it's a waste product from the cooking and the restaurant industry could then be made to good use. According to the report, the overall greenhouse gas emissions are 65 to 95% lower than traditional fossil kerosene-based fuels. And in this particular flight, only a small portion of SAF was used. However, the balance of carbon emissions was offset with tree planting and the use of SAF and other flights with a cumulative total of 0 emissions. So it sounds like there's a lot of mental gymnastics that made them get to net zero on that particular flight, but it's a good first start, right? And so, and so why is it important? So people love to travel, and many people don't hesitate, as I said, to book a trip for no reason. You know, let's just get away. When the pandemic's over, people are going to start traveling again more than ever. Maybe I know a lot of people that don't travel. Like I have always been a big traveler since I've been, you know, in business, and then with my family, we've done some pretty amazing trips. And so we try to, you know, in recent years, we've been trying to offset our carbon using offsets. But I know a lot of people that say when the pandemic's over, you know, I've never been out of the country, but darn it, I am going to. And so, you know, if everybody started traveling like that again, it would really kickstart the economy, but it would also be really, really damaging for the environment. Yeah. And so we need to have lower carbon options. So SAF is better than traditional kerosene because it does reduce the emissions and it does work in current jet engines. So the infrastructure that's already there can still be reused. But the critics are pointing to the fact that if we actually turn to bio SAF, the agricultural land that is needed would be better used to feed the world's poor rather than fly the world's rich. Kind of a, I get it.
Catch
right?
22, yeah.
Yeah.
But what's the thought of just using oil that's waste from the industry, as you were mentioning?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities. But what's really interesting, and I'm seeing this in the maritime industry through my day job, is hydrogen fuel. So there's something that they call blue hydrogen, which is essentially hydrogen that is created using renewable energy. Basically, they split a water molecule and they use the hydrogen. It emits no carbon when it's consumed for propulsion, and then the other molecules are water. So, you have a real super clean fuel that's powered by renewable energy. They're already using hydrogen to propel large ships around the world. And there is a lot of research right now. In fact, all of the big aviation companies are now looking at hydrogen powered jet aircraft that can actually travel around the world completely emissions free. So that, I think, is yeah. Now that's going to require a huge amount of infrastructure change, right? Just everything from fueling to service equipment to the training and the technicians and the actual aircraft themselves. So, SAF is definitely an interim measure that will help us get there.
Yeah.
Without crippling the economy, which is really, it's important. Keep people employed and in this green transition that we're going to start seeing, I think, in the near future.
And which airlines is doing this over in Germany? Is it Lufthansa?
I think it's Lufthansa. Yeah, they're the biggest ones out of Frankfurt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, and this is actually a story that made it on the Mother Daughter Earth feed. So I do believe it was Lufthansa.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I think it showed a Lufthansa plane in the picture.
Yeah.
Well, good for them.
Yeah.
So next one, in number 4 spot, it says Amsterdam is the first city worldwide that wants to ban fossil fuel advertising.
Ooh.
So now a little recap: the city of Amsterdam, it's one of the most historic and progressive cities in the world, known for their alternative culture and different districts, shall we say.
That's a great way to put it. Alternative culture. I love that.
Yeah, it's a great city, and people, not everybody participates in those types of activities that we're not speaking about, but they're available for those who do want it, and it's very tolerant, and people kind of live and let live. They have extremely low rates of crime. And in Holland, I think they actually closed all of their high security prisons. There are no prisons in Holland now, and the reason is that they've decriminalized drugs. I think all drugs, and they view it as a social and medical problem, not a criminal problem. And so when you do those two things, if you really truly want to rehabilitate crime or criminals, you basically just have to look at those kinds of aspects of it. So they say. Seems to work for them. But the recent motion through their governmental procedures was a motion to ban fossil fuel and air travel advertising within its jurisdiction. So basically, kind of like banning tobacco advertising, it's a similar kind of thing. The motion was passed on December 18th, and it was presented by the Green Party of Holland, and had support from 51 other community organizations. So a lot of bipartisan support for it. The city of Amsterdam has a stated goal to achieve a 55% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030 and a 95% reduction of emissions by 2050. So the city has pretty aggressive targets for carbon reduction. Federally, the Dutch government aims to make electricity production 100% carbon neutral in 2050 and generate 70% of energy from using wind and solar by 2030. So this is a really popular initiative, and the people of Amsterdam and of Holland fully support it. Why is it important? It's, I think, because these types of motions are the first steps to pass the laws that support them.
Mhm.
It's part of a growing trend of public frustration towards the fossil fuel industry and kind of the dirty tricks that they're playing in terms of suppressing real science. People are now becoming aware of the destructive nature of the products and understands that the marketing tactics employed by big oil have been misleading. And it's important to see tangible municipal support for federal commitments to the Paris Accord, because without them, it'll be very difficult to achieve the required level of reduction. And we need to reverse the effects of climate change now, not 20 years from now. So in order to hit these targets in 2030, you've got to start today. And I think that, unlike in North America, when these countries abroad, when they actually go and say they're going to do something, they actually go and they take action and do it. So it's it becomes law, and we will say we're going to do it, and then a new administration gets voted in, and then a special interest group starts lobbying them, and then all of a sudden it gets so watered down it's ineffective.
Yeah.
So Amsterdam is a global city that leads in many ways, socially and environmentally. And they're a model for good governance, and they will inspire other cities to follow. And I believe that to be true.
Yeah, I love that. And also, again, it just reminds us and highlights the power of marketing and how pervasive that is, and how it affects how we make choices and those daily choices as well. And
so you bring up a really good point about marketing, and I think that there's actually, I don't know if you're familiar with the speaker Simon Sinek. He's quite a popular speaker, and he did a lot of marketing type videos. And I follow him. He's an interesting guy. He has some pretty good thoughts. But one of the things he said recently was that climate change has a marketing problem. And when we call it climate change, it sounds pretty benign, right? Oh, it's changing. Oh, the weather changes every day, and so make climate. And he said we should rebrand it. We should call it climate cancer.
Wow.
If you call it climate cancer, then all of a sudden people go, holy crap, we need to fight this. We need to take the chemo. We need to treat this and to fix it, and so that we don't escape from it. And it sounds way more scary and way more in your face and way more immediate. And we need to do something, because we all know that cancer is much more beatable if you have early detection and early treatment. So I would have to say that there's the marketing and branding problem with our movement. But it's not up to me to make the decision to change it, but maybe we should start talking about it in that way.
I agree. And one of my good friends from college, he was actually on the podcast, I think one of the earliest episodes. He is working with a company that's all that they're focusing on. They're doing research purely on how to change the marketing perspective and approach to climate change, and really how to communicate climate change more effectively. So it's huge, and it's true.
Yeah. I recall that episode. Yeah. They're doing great things
through unique ways too.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like there's a lot of really smart, I'm going to say, young people that are much more savvy with internet and marketing and how to reach other people and convince them and persuade them than I am. I'm a Gen Xer, and so when I speak, it's through the lens of my experience and my age. And I'm great at, I think I'm okay at reaching other people in my own sort of demographic, but I'm limited. And I think what we really need to do is reach the younger generations, because they are the ones that are going to be making the big change. I mean, they don't have any choice, right? I had a baby boomer a relative say to my kids one time, "Don't worry about it. You're smart. You'll figure it out." And I think I've mentioned this before, and it's such a cop out, right? Because they have abdicated. They've been greedy. They've taken everything and left nothing. And these young people are the ones that need to fix it, and they will, and because they have no choice. It's really kind of. I'm laughing ironically, I guess, because, I sure wouldn't want to be, walking a mile in their shoes, because I think that they're pretty bummed out about it, a lot of them.
I was speaking to someone who she's in her upper 20s, and she said that she does not remember a time in her life where she has not been aware of eco-anxiety.
Wow.
She grew up in California and lives in the near the redwoods, and I was just shocked when she said that she has never remembered a time without eco-anxiety, and that's something I had never thought of.
Yeah.
Isn't
we had the existential threat of global thermonuclear annihilation.
Yeah.
And that was bad. But I think we all inherently knew that there was one or two people that were responsible for that decision. And, if they were sane, they wouldn't do it. There's this escalation, and it was certainly scary. And we had all the, the drills of hiding under the desks at school, et cetera. But in the back of our minds, we thought the adults had this shit under control, and we didn't have to worry about it too much, right?
Yeah.
But this is bigger than one individual. This is a collective of decades, if not hundreds of years of destruction or destructive practices for simply one purpose, and that's greed. We've known for decades that this is what's happening, and yet we haven't changed it. And so that, I think if you're a young person looking at the world right now, gosh, that's got to be tough. I empathize with them. I really do. And so, you know what? I'll be one of the sane adults in the room, and I'll try and help them. I mean, excuse me. I think that I've been accused of being quite Pollyanna and sort of placating people, like kind of like, don't worry, it's not so bad. Here's some happy eco news for you. I don't shy away from the fact that, yeah, things are tough, and they're gonna continue to be tough for a while. But I also, through a result of looking for the good news stories and really looking past all of the negative stuff, you can see that there's a lot of people doing really, really good things. And this isn't to go quietly into that dark night. We're going to kick and scream and rage against it. And we're going to make sure that our species survives, but also our planet survives as well. Because who the hell wants to live on a planet that's just desecrated?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, I want to see forests like what you can see behind me on the screen
Yes.
here for the future.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that brings us to number 5.
5.
Okay, so number 5. Pollinator-friendly solar could be a win-win for climate and landowners, but greenwashing is a worry. So I don't think greenwashing is such a worry on this one. It's the next step in a growing trend to reduce the loss of farmland to the growing demands of renewable energy. So basically, all of the new solar plants that are being built around the world in arable land regions are being built that a lot of them are being built so they can sustain pollinator-friendly crops. So basically, the idea is I think it's called agrophotovoltaics, and the idea is that you can plant crops in and around solar panels, and the panels can provide basically shelter from extreme environmental conditions. So there's higher humidity on the ground because the sun doesn't beat directly down onto the ground and evaporate the moisture out of the soil. It provides shelter and shade from frost, shade from extreme sun. And so as our climate gets increasingly more extreme, these are helping to prevent damage from hail even. So in order to have good crops, you need to have pollinators. And so the same land that would be used for cropping is now being also returned to having a pollinator-friendly crops as well. So you might have a solar farm adjacent to a agricultural operation, and instead of just having bare land that's mowed down or sprayed with glyphosate, you actually have pollinator-friendly crops that would help pollinate the land adjacent to it. So why is it important? Well, globally, there's been a rapid and kind of crazy, scary decline in pollinator species. And 35% of human food crops are created by pollination from insects. Due to their decline, the farmers have been actually introducing pollinator-friendly crops near their plants to encourage bees and other butterflies, et cetera, to pollinate. And they get the benefit of increased yields actually in their crops, and they can actually see that. But for nature, up to 85% of wild plants require pollinators to create seeds, and without them, there would be a big loss in food and habitat for wild animal species. So I think it's great that the companies that are building solar installations and traditional food farmers are both understanding the value of protecting the important yet fragile creatures, and that gives me hope for their survival, and actually for the survival of our species as well. So so that is the top 5.
I love it. I love it. And you know what, Grant, I think for me, I'm going to kind of walk away from this conversation. Every conversation we have makes me think about like a new way to perceive the world, to be honest. But from this conversation, I really am taking away the thought that we're not shying away from the reality and the magnitude and the gravity of it. But one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about what you do and the content you share, and from, you know, and I'm so passionate about the way that my mom and I prioritize positivity, is we all need to remember that we're not alone. Like it's, as you mentioned, like there's connecting and creating that sense of community is so important, because it's one of the reasons why I think people get discouraged. You're not alone. There's so many people out there doing amazing things. And yes, the situation is grim, but as you say, every single time you come on here, we can figure it out, and we're going to, and we just need to stay focused on that. And a huge part of that is staying motivated and positive, which is why we're such huge fans. And obviously I'm going to link it in the show notes. And obviously I say this in our posts, but go to happyeconews.com, sign up for their newsletter, get in touch with Grant to be a guest blogger, and also follow their Instagram account. It's a new one since you were last on here, but it's official Happy Eco News, right?
Yeah, exactly. There are imposters.
There are imposters, and Instagram got this one wrong.
Yeah. Oh well. You know, they're. I was gonna say they're only human, but I wonder if they're actually robots.
But Grant, as always, just thank you so much. You are so knowledgeable in environmental topics in your own right and in your day job and all of that, and you bring all that insight not only into Happy Eco News, but also into conversations with us. And we value you and your expertise and your time so much, and you give us a little happy step every time we chat.
Well, right back at you, because I actually feel like it's speaking with you ladies, it just feels like a reaffirmation of why I'm doing what I'm doing. That it's really great to have this communication, and I think you really touched on something, where we're isolated. We feel like we're isolated. That we, maybe are we the only ones that actually feel so scared, worried, empowered, hopeful, all in the same breath. And I think that we need to connect with others, and so this podcast is a great way to do that. The newsletter is a great way to do that. I'm hoping to, at some point in 2022, it was supposed to happen last year, have a Happy Eco Festival.
Yes.
Which will be somewhere in British Columbia, Canada. So when the borders open back up and everybody's able to travel on their carbon neutral flights, they can come to Canada and hang out, and we'll have a good time and celebrate the wins. Because I really think we need to do that. As much as we need to spread the word, we need to also have a good time as well.
Oh, be the first ones to sign up for that festival, Grant.
Sounds
yes,
good.
Yes, because what you do keeps us positive to keep in the fight.
Yeah.
And if I were only hearing sad news all the time, I think I might curl up. But no, you keep going.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so
thank
much,
you very much.
Grant. And we can't wait to have you back on the podcast. And we're excited to hear about everything that's going on with Happy Eco News. And listeners, go get in touch with Grant to help him out with guest blogs. It's time. Let's all chime in.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Grant.
Thank you for your time and expertise. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.